firstly, if you wouldn't mind just, one by one, just giving a quick summary of how you see your role, and then we'll go into some detail.
Hi, my name's Doug Bennett, and as James has said, I run a company called Ichthys. We specialise in technical provision for events generally, but obviously as a Christian I have a heart for Passion Place and to see the gospel put out in the streets to the everyday man in various different ways, whether it's by people being involved in the plays or by seeing the plays that goes past. Two things about the technical side. Well, first of all, most important from my point of view, never underestimate the value of a bacon butty. Anyway, that's aside. So yes, from a technical perspective, it's great when you can have good acting and lots of wonderful stories to come out there, passion play put across in different views. But if people can't hear it, it doesn't mean anything. And as you saw with the play that was held here, there's a tremendous value in being able to use multimedia and lighting and so on for actually bringing out the various aspects of the play. You can have the wonderful bright lights of the resurrection or whatever it might be. So there's a place for having plays during the day where you can get the crowds in a crowded marketplace or wherever it might be, but also at night when you can get the lighting and so on in. Now obviously once you start getting into the nighttime view, there's additional considerations with cost, but the most important thing from my perspective is making sure that all of your actors can be heard. And that can be quite a complicated aspect. So we are here to sort of try and help you to get your technical aspects sorted out as much as you can.
Thank you.
You just name the company here, please.
Ichthys. It's the company's called Ichthys, and it's an acrostic for those of you who remember back to your days of English at school, for the Greek word Ichthys, and the Greek letters spell Jesus Christ, God's Son, Saviour.
Hi, as James said, I'm Carol. Fundraising, yeah, interesting. The things I believe in most of fundraising is don't feel you have to organise everything yourself. You're there to organise the things that you're good at, but also to network and to coordinate the things that are going on within the people who are part of your play. Sorry, don't feel you have to do everything yourself. I became involved with Southampton in 2011, and that was fairly late on in the production. So I joined in November, and the play was in April. And in that time, the organisation of other events, letting people organise what they wanted to, and getting to know people, and it's not until you get to know people that you know where their strengths are, you know what links they have as well and what you can tap into. Basically, I raised and coordinated £10,500. So, it is possible, but I'm a very big believer in networking and getting to know who your cast are, get to know where they come from, get to know how they fill their day, and get to know what they're good at. So, you can tap into those, and also you organise events at the level of your cast. So it's no good organising a big grand ball for people who can't afford a £30 ticket. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm saying chicken and egg, not chicken and egg, grandmother and sucking eggs, but the events need to be aligned with the people's budgets I know money isn't something that we're very comfortable to talk about, but it's a very important play, because if you don't have your budget, you won't have your sound, you won't have your lights, you won't have your staging. So events to the right level.
Thank you. So summary of the role.
Hello, I'm Matt. I split my time between teaching event management at University of Winchester, and that's about licensing, health and safety, risk management, large-scale road closures, things like that. And I also run my own events business called Matt Bundy Events Limited. and that actually started as a result of 2011 when I was asked to do it as the event manager, and then we made so many contacts. So there was a real kind of great example there. My role in 2011, for those of you that don't know, Southampton Passion in 2011 got 9,000 people, had a production budget of about £70,000. And I was the event director for that. Worked with a wonderful guy called Neil Maddock to write it, who I think came here last year, and some of you might know. And actually there's another one being planned in 25th of March this year, so come down to Southampton on Good Friday. The wonderful thing about Southampton in 2011 was that the idea it was in the evening, it was Good Friday, we closed 2 roads in Southampton, we built 5 stages, it was a procession, but it was a huge logistical operation. I think it was about 2 years from initial conception to the event taking place, and I was brought in about 18 months beforehand, and I coordinated, took what the client, talking events terms now, took what Neil and other people wanted and said, right, this is what we need. So we need technical, we need power and things. And then I would liaise with people like Doug and other companies to bring that in. I think we had several hundred people involved. We had a choir of 90, we had 30, 40 in the cast. We were closing the roads. We had a very tight load-in and load-out time, so working through the night at one point. Sorry, yeah. It was a very, very big logistical operation, and since then I've gone on, and I really feel my company is at our best when we're specialised with community charities. We do work in churches in Southampton, because again, being Christian, I actually want to see this stuff happen, so we're always going to kind of give our best to it. I think the charity community ethos is where we're there, because we can look at what must be done by contractors, what must be done, and how you then link that to volunteers, and how you look after volunteers, briefing documents, things like that. So that's kind of more of the event directorship, and think about the show in a year's time and how do we get there. So that's me.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Wheeler. I'm a professional. I run my own PR company, and I've also done a lot of freelance journalism, mainly in industry, agriculture and farming. How on earth do I get involved in Christ in the Centre? I happen to be a member of the Leicester Churches Media Trust, and they got an approach from people who are then running Christ in the Centre saying, help, nobody knows, or not enough people know about us. So I joined the committee. I instantly made friends with Jay. It's difficult not to, isn't it? Really inspiring experience to get involved with Christ in the Centre and just help it get the recognition it needed. It was started off as a quite small production in the marketplace in Leicester, and it grew and grew. In the final days, we were attracting 10,000 people to the biggest pedestrianised area of the city and doing a full hour-plus performance. 10,000 people, even though it's a pedestrianised area, you still have traffic noise because one of the major bus routes ran right behind the stage. So we had a fairly beefy PA and sound system, and that runs into a lot of costs, and that the event reached its limit in the end of 2013 and has been replaced by something smaller. I would love to get Christ in the Centre back in the air again. I don't know if it's ever going to happen. I have dreamed that it will, but it won't. Or maybe it will, maybe it won't. I just don't know. But my role there was in harnessing as much of the local, regional media as I could to get involved in Christ in the Centre, to buy into it. And in that stage, the success we had was getting radio, because we were held on a Good Friday morning. There's not a lot else happening in the news world on a Good Friday morning. Result is you get Radio Leicester turning up with their radio car and 3 reporters and giving us virtually wall-to-wall coverage. That's great. That really got the message around. And fortunately, I used to work for the evening paper in Leicester, the Leicester Mercury, so I knew who to talk to in the newsroom. It really is about contact making and contact building and contact maintaining, and not just connecting with them at Easter. If you're putting a call out for cast members, as we used to do in, say, September, talking to them then and getting a piece in then, and then they'd put the fabulous picture of James performing as Jesus in the paper again, that would remind people, and that's just all building recognition the whole year round, and really getting sort of a momentum, and then maintaining those press contacts, keeping friendly with them, keeping them informed, and the more you work with them, the more they work for you. That's really the key to keeping the press involved. There are times not to phone a newspaper and not to phone a radio station. Don't phone the radio station 5 minutes before the 12 o'clock headlines. They're all busy doing something else. Phone them 3 minutes afterwards. They've got a bit of time. Little tricks like that. And also, one thing to know about local radio programs, listen to the programs for the line that you call in for competitions. Because that one goes into the production studio, which is straight beside the broadcast studio. That's the number, that number will be manned the whole time. A Good Friday morning, the reception isn't manned. There's a skeleton staff in the newsroom, so those phones might not get answered. That's the one to go for, because there's always somebody sitting there. I've got 1,000 more tips like that if you want them.
I'm Sue, I work at Bournemouth College. I've had a long-standing relationship with this particular Christian centre, putting on refreshments on a monthly basis with folk in the community and in other local churches. Refreshments are, as you said, extremely important. They make people feel warm inside. They make you feel happy, particularly if it's chocolate. But also, for us, our lunch is a healthy lunch, or healthy-ish lunch for you, because I know you're also eating sugar in the morning and you're eating sugar and cake in the afternoon. But very important. My role as a Christian is, that I want to support things that are in the community, that are in the church, and it's a privilege to do so.
Bear with me, this is very new to me. I've not long been here in Poole, only just this year involved in the Passion Play, but I've been now promoted to tea lady for our group.
Sounds like it's the most important role.
Of course, of course. No, it's lovely actually. When we meet, most of these people are coming in from work, or mothers have got their children to bed or whatever, and they come in, and it's lovely for them to start with a cup of tea and a biscuit and say hello to everybody, really get it going. Sometimes it does go on a bit too long, Sandra will tell you, but it does make a good start.
Thank you. Now, as I say, the point of this is to open you up. So we're just going to go through them again, and we're just going to go to a little bit more detail about all of their roles. But I'm hoping that they're going to get this tsunami of questions in a moment. And this is, as I say, your opportunity to ask the most difficult, embarrassing, uncomfortable questions you can. Whether you think that they're relevant to what you're doing, or whether they're just a question that has occurred to you that you think would be relevant to anyone who's listening. So, coming back to Douglas. When Douglas spoke at a previous conference, he stepped up because I wanted him to talk about how important it is to bring the technical team in early. You remember that? So that they could become not just part of the creative process, the technical process, but also, of course, the funding to work out how to make the best of every single penny that you raise. So would you like to expand a little on the importance of coming in early? And then I'd also like you just to add something about the breadth of opportunities that you have technically. You've done a few productions, but you've already seen that a lot of productions limit themselves to what they think that they can do with technical equipment. And maybe you can just open up some people's minds about what is possible.
Okay. Yes, in terms of actually getting us involved early, I think this stands for all of the people up here. Fundraising obviously has to happen early on. If you're planning your event, you need to get all the professional and technical paperwork in place and so on. But from a technical perspective, one area that I think a lot of people underestimate in a very big way is how much it costs. Now, we as a Christian company tend to do things on a shoestring. Not for other people, but for you lot we tend to. I try and find other people who can afford to and charge them lots, so that I can end up charging less here. But it still does cost a lot of money. If you've got a crew that's moving around through crowds and they all need microphones, you haven't got the luxury half the time of being able to switch microphones around. You've got to have one for each crew member. And that soon adds up. You can have 16, 20, even 30 mics on some occasions, depending on how big your cast is.
What's your experience of using a combination of professionals that you bring in and volunteers from the company? Things like as mic coordinators, or even on the setup, the build, getting.
What a lot of technical companies will do is they'll come in and they'll say they'll give you a price for everything and say this is what it's going to cost, and they'll bring a bunch of people down to do stuff. Now, in reality, a lot of the technical stuff that takes place behind the mixing desk and with the setup and so on takes place before the show, apart from the odd one or two people during the show who need to have the technical knowledge. There's an awful lot of other people who may have a technical interest but may not have an awful lot of experience that can do fairly important roles like making sure people are mic'd up, making sure they're in the right place, that they've got their microphones switched on. One of two things that tends to happen is they either forget to switch their mics on, in which case you end up with people shouting nicely but nobody can hear them, or they forget to switch them off and then they go for a wander and chat to their mates and you get some interesting stuff coming through the PA. We do try and monitor that, and we do try and mute them when we go off, but obviously with this kind of thing, a lot of the time we come in, we see the actors perhaps the first time at the last rehearsal, and having somebody stood next to the sound man saying, that's James who's on now, or you've got Jesus coming on, not Jesus, you can usually tell who he is, but you've got, you know, Judas is going to say something in a minute, or whatever. You know when you can mute and unmute the microphone. So there's lots of little roles that you can consider for people who have an interest in the technical side of things, but aren't necessarily going to be doing the technical. And that can reduce your costs, because you're not having a professional involved.
So just to summarise that, if you imagine there are occasions where you as a company might want to train people up to be able to do the sorts of roles that Douglas is talking about. So if you have a relationship with your technical crew over a period of years, you might find that somebody who starts just handing out mics, by the third year might actually be able to not only work out the microphone plots, but actually start working the desk, start working, setting up the receivers, all this sort of thing. So it's in your interest to start finding ways of training your own locals, your own volunteers, to learn some of the skills. And then Douglas isn't looking to make profit on these. As he said, he's trying to encourage other people to subsidise your shows, your performances, whether they know it or not. Douglas is keen that you should make his job easier by providing manpower, by providing enthusiastic people. It costs more. If I wanted to, I'd like Douglas to be at every rehearsal of mine, but that would cost me a fortune. So it's as he says, it's key that you have somebody that is in constant liaison with Douglas or the equivalent, so that on the day he's confident about talking about the show, keeping up to date with any changes that have been made. As you know, Sharon, changes are made right to the very last second, and then sometimes even during the show as well. And if Douglas or his equivalent hasn't got a clean line of sight or line of conversation to any of the crew, the whole play could just collapse, and I've seen that happen. Thankfully not with mine, but with other plays.
Yeah, one of the areas that James works with me, obviously when he's directing or producing a show, is to produce the mic plot. The mic plot can be quite complicated, because obviously you want to minimise the number of radio mics you're going to use, because every one costs money. So you want to be able to work it so that the mic that Centurion A is using gets passed on to somebody else, so that you can use the same mic for 2 or 3 people. But that can be quite a complicated thing to do.
The person who sets up church, microphones, speakers, whatever, music, they're often closet enthusiasts. And I take great pleasure in seeing them meet somebody like Douglas and treble their knowledge. And often in a town they become the most qualified, because very few people get to do outdoor events. And it's a slightly different...
And very often events of the size, because, I mean, make no mistake about the fact that Passion Play, even though it's a simple, maybe a simple kind of play, it's actually quite a large event, because you're using a lot of microphones, you're using staging. Staging is another classic example where volunteers come in, because you have to have a couple of professionals from the point of view of health and safety to put it up properly, but you can have 10 people lugging stuff around and putting it in place, and that saves you 10 people's worth of wages. So again, it's very often one of the things that when I'm working with James we spend a lot of time doing is looking at the staging. James will come up with an idea for the staging. We'll go back and sort of say, well, actually, if you change that little bit there, you can save a lot of money because we can have less blocks. And there's little things working with the director on staging, on lighting, on PA systems, where actually you can look at it and sort of say, well, if that person delivered their line, 10 seconds later, you can be able to put them next to that person's shoulder, or you can get them to switch mics over, or whatever it might be. So it's getting us engaged early from that point of view it's helpful to be able to either tweak the plot, either to look at the positions of people, where you're going to lay it out, because sometimes you look at the land and you say, oh, wonderful if we could have people wandering down through this alleyway. But it doesn't work from a technical perspective because you can lose all of the mic signal. So it's little things like that sometimes even the actual layout of the production can be tweaked just a very little bit to make a huge difference.
Your funding sources can come from very different areas when you're least expecting them. I was talking about networking just now, and I was talking to one person. I didn't know who he was. He was a member of the cast, and that's all I knew, and I was getting to know him. And he said, I'm actually a company director. Would you like a cheque for £500? Yes, please. Thank you very much. You never, ever know who you are talking to. You never know who might have the contact, the lead into that business that somebody else might not have access to, but that person you're having a coffee with just happens to know the finance director for so-and-so. Corporate funding is a different issue. Corporate funding is and can be very difficult because a lot of places won't give to religious organisations. In the Passion in 2011, we had to tweak the wording and make a community event and a city-wide event. And so if you've got somebody that is very eloquent with their wording and is a writer or something that really, someone who loves to put words together, get them involved. And also, if somebody happens to work for a bank, get the leads from them as to how you can apply and all that sort of thing. £500 cheques don't come along very often, but when they do, then grab them with both hands.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's not really my area, but it's an area a friend of mine was involved with the funding. And one thing, I just spotted the Europassion sign over there, and it's reminded me. There is a massive resource that in this country we're not very good at tapping into, and that is the Euro funding sort of market. There's a tremendous amount, it's in the region of billions of euros that's been set aside specifically for community projects that is never claimed. Now, part of the reason it's never claimed is because the paperwork's inches thick, which is it's quite difficult to sort of go through. But a lot of it, as Carol said, it's the wording. If you're doing a project that involves working with children, you put down that you're doing a youth project. There's funding for that specifically. If you're doing a project with addicts who are recovering, there's funding specifically there for that in the Euro funding. Just make sure you put that down specifically. So you have to apply separately for all the separate bits of funding in the different Euro market, but the Euro one's a real pain.
When Carol was speaking earlier, she mentioned about not working alone, but not feeling you have to take on everything. I think this touches on every aspect of putting on a big community play or any big community project. Very often you can bring in a great expert, was it 40 years experience?
Yeah.
Yeah, 40 years experience.
More than I care to.
So valuable. So the chances are it would be tempting to put everything on her shoulders. I've seen this happen time and time again, where sometimes the fundraiser or the PR people, certainly the technical, are waged people. They'll come in and they're provided with a wage because they're so valuable. But again, to make the most of that, you always surround them with the best team you can, the most enthusiastic people. I've seen huge amounts of money raised by people who have never done any fundraising before, simply because they've got somebody like Carol leading them. Carol couldn't do it on her own, or this other woman couldn't have done it on her own, but with her team, which had 14 people, and they raised 40,000 in about 4 months. It was a triumph. Yeah.
If I could just expand that very quickly. So the Southampton Passion had a camera team of about 18 students on it, who did a 9-camera setup. And we had students in the event management team. We made active links with Solent University. One of the real great examples which I'll tell very quickly, there was a procession through the middle of the square, and of course that's live on the big screens that we had, and no student, no staff wanted to be on that camera that walked backwards through the square with his shot going to 9,000 people and being picked up by the local media. One student took that on. That student before that event was low on confidence, low on experience, all kinds of stuff. He went, you know what, I'm going to do it. He nailed it, he absolutely nailed it. And as far as I'm aware, he's now working for BBC Archiva with some of the big guys, and his career turned around that night. That was just one moment, and the shots that you see on our DVD are of Neil walking through the square. Those are his camera shots. He doesn't know where he's going, there's not someone behind him, but he's walking backwards. But we had a huge technical team from the university, and they were very good, they knew what they were doing.
Splendid. Universities do offer an opportunity also to expand that portrait that you're showing of your community. Often when you put on these plays, they are a portrait of your community, and there's a big gap in the middle. There's sort of the 20 to sort of 40 is often missed. And with universities and those leaving university, if you can speak to the university pastor or to any of the student union groups, encourage them to take part. Your production will be richer for it, just by showing that section of the community.
Yes, we work with Crisis Centre, possibly you said things that make things harder. Running into people who've set something up and refuse to let go of it. Crisis Centre started the Anglican Church in Leicester said we want a major public event. There were already big events for Diwali and the other festivals in Leicester. They wanted something, and they put the people who came in to do it was a group from a local church in Kibworth, and they set it up, and it was a very good event. But because there was no financial control, it was very quickly getting out of control, and the budget was going past £50,000. The diocese was only putting £10,000 of that in, and it was a huge amount of work being put together. When I came on to do the publicity, they said, we are aware you run your own company, we're bringing you and 2 other people into the committee as business people. You've got to get that animal under control. And we cut the budget from 52,000 to 35,000 and still put on a perfectly good show. It wasn't without its difficulties, and we had one that is possibly the most horrible Sunday afternoon I've spent in my life, sitting down with the producer and her right-hand person, myself and the newly appointed treasurer, who was a professional fundraiser, and saying, listen, what do we need and what do we not? And the producer at that time saying, well, we produce bookmarks, we produce posters, we produce leaflets, 4 or 5 bits of print. And I said, okay, well listen, no, you've done that to get yourself noticed, but I've come on to do the PR, and I'm going to get big bits in the Leicester Mercury, I'm going to get big bits in the local newspaper, and I'm going to get into all the other media that you try and, every single bit of media I could. I said, so if I'm getting publicity there, what of this lot do we not need? This £4,000 worth of print do we not need? And he said, we need this, we need all 5 of them. No, you can't get rid of any of them. I said, no, we're going to get rid of at least 3 of them, because I'm going to replace them with my effort. Let's do. And eventually I said, listen, okay, we're going to get rid of 4 of them, we're going to keep 1 of them, now you choose which one, or else I choose which one. Over to you. And over a cup of tea, she didn't make a decision. So I said, right, we keep the mini poster, because we can turn a mini poster into a big poster, we can turn it, and all we've got to do is size it, turn it into anything, frankly. I don't think we need those other 4 things. And so we didn't produce any bookmarks, we didn't produce any, I think she had a design for a Christmas card announcing the event, which I thought, well, no, you're asking people to concentrate on an Easter event at a time when they're actually concentrating on quite a lot else. No. And no, it would disappear in the rubbish in early January anyway. So what was the point of it? So sometimes you have to sit down and make those decisions. And the one thing you can replace. Well, what was good that came out of it, we cut £4,000 off the budget. We cut the budget. Also, basically, we did what I think every group has to do. You've either got resource in terms of work donated, or you've got 3 sources of work donated, work you pay for, and stuff you pay for. As you quite say, you can shrink that one. You can shrink that one if you talk to people nicely, providing you expand that one. the more you get people on board, the more they will work for you. I was asked to value the work I'd done for Christ in the Centre, and I said, well, it probably comes to about £7,000 or £8,000 a year. So I've donated £40,000 of my time to Christ in the Centre, very happily, and I've been richly rewarded with great experiences and fabulous friendships. If they had to buy in a PR agency, they'd have been in financial stuck a lot earlier.
Okay. So
I believe that having a procession is absolutely essential if you can fund it. The problem is it does mean closing roads and quite a bit of organisation and stewards and meeting. Gosh, you know, it depends how aggressive your local council is. Leicester City, you know, required quite a lot of work on it, and you know, the number of stewards we had was astonishing. It's essential because it meets what I would call the accidental audience. The people who are going who are going shopping, wandering around the middle of Leicester and come face to face with this, and it stops them. And there is one very good example of that. His testimony is on the Passion Trust website, a lad called Nathan Aboka, who is half Nigerian, half Pakistani, was uncertain of his faith one day, walking through the middle of Leicester, when he came across Christ in the Centre, and the image he saw was James dragging his cross between the flogging scene and the crucifixion scene, down the middle of Churchgate, which is one of the main shopping streets in Leicester, and down towards Hampton, and you're wandering past, I'm going to say W.H. Smith, it's not W.H. Smith, no, it's not Woolworths either. I can't, no, you're wandering past all these shops, and meeting an audience that simply wasn't coming to look at that. And Nathan saw that, and he'd said, right, I'm joining a church, and he joined Early Trinity in the middle of Leicester. And 6 years later, after seeing James carry his cross, Nathan joined the cast a couple of years later, and in the last year of Christ in the Centre, Nathan played Jesus in the next production. And that's just the clearest example of that's what we're there to do. We're there to bring God's message to people who weren't looking for it, or uncertain about it, or had their doubts. And you know, that's why I would always want a procession. When we had to cut the procession, it was one of the things that I felt hurt me most. I was really annoyed that we had to do it, but we had to do it for cost reasons.
Thank you. So at the same time that Christ in the Centre was having these horrible discussions about these cuts, going from 50,000 down to 30,000, and people having to sacrifice all their visions and their ideas and traditions of how they put it on. It was an ugly conversation. Relationships could have been destroyed. Certainly, as a trustee of the Passion Trust, I hear about a lot of struggles that companies are going through, and people having to leave because of differences of opinions, and it's often about money and the best way to spend it. At the same time this conversation was happening in Leicester, I was producing a production down in Wiltshire, and we had a bunch of men, professional men, who love spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets, but they love spreadsheets. They're tapping away, and at the end of it, with their heads down, they just said, we can't afford to do it. It was going to cost something like 30,000. And they said, we can't afford to do it. So all the preparation that had been done, all the enthusiasm, all that excitement, all that community that was beginning to build, suddenly was in danger of collapsing. I was exhausted from this conversation that was going on in Leicester. That was still buzzing in my mind. I then went to Wiltshire and started talking to them, and I'd had enough. I'd heard about money, money, money for months on end, and it was driving me nuts. And I said, right, we do this for nothing. And pencils were put down, and eyes were blinked. And I refused to say anything else. I didn't tell them how they were going to do it or whatever. And do you know, apart from one woman who gave her inheritance, which was £12,000, she gave her inheritance to the whole production. Apart from that, they did it for nothing. And that 12,000 was spent in a way that actually we could have provided the same thing for nothing, but it was just a bonus that we were given that. So there's out of this came that it felt like the feeding the 5,000, where they all have to ask themselves, what do we have? And you ask, and suddenly the whole project becomes an opportunity to do everything in faith, to ask, and it will be given. And it really tests your faith and your mettle, and really tests what you're actually doing. And you'll be astounded at what will come your way if you're that open. Yes, please.
Yeah, processions is a really interesting one. It's something I think is really important in a play. In Southampton we had one, but it was between two stages in one venue. So once we closed the two roads, that was okay. We're planning one in March, which is up a wide high street pedestrian thing. And I think the kind of key, there's some other events where I've done where we've had processions and rolling cordons, we call them. So you have several teams in high-vis jackets, you give them a rope, and then you have 3 or 4 walking alongside, and you have someone like me who's not afraid to shout at stewards politely at the front, and then you just take the cast through it. So the cast, all you need to do is focus on walking. The councils and health and safety aspect to that, and I think it is potentially getting stricter, so it's something to be careful of. We built up a very good relationship with Southampton City Council to the extent where when I got in touch with them last year and said we're doing this again in March, the response was absolutely fantastic. Here's what we can do to help you. But you get that by being very sensible, by being very clever, by making sure that when they show up on site, which they have been known to do, as with the emergency services, that actually everything's in high-vis jackets, everything's organised. I would say in terms of road closure specifically, you'd have to be a very structured approach, and kind of sit down 9 months before and go, right, what exactly are we doing? What roads are we going up? And if you take yourselves through in a very, very slow process, then have an early meeting with the council. It's all attention to detail. When I've heard and seen problems happen before, it's been because someone hasn't sent an up-to-date plan or whatever. The council should be there to support you and say, this is what you can do, this is what we do need. Having just closed a road for Passion in March, I got the paperwork through Friday, and so we know who we've spoken to and things. But I think it's a twofold. It's the really good planning beforehand, and it's also having a really good team on the day. So you know, have an event director whose sole responsibility is crowd management.
That person might be a professional.
Yep.
Who might be paid as well,
yes.
But they have a team of volunteers.
Yeah. So quite often when we do events, despite the fact that my background is stage management, I do a lot of production management, I don't get involved in that at all. My job is just about making sure licensing is there, making sure that your large team of stewards is looked after. We do steward briefings, so literally you turn up and there'll be anything from manual handling to what to wear to how to act and stuff, and we'll go through that with them, and then we'll put them in teams, so there'll be team leaders. So I don't have to talk to 40 stewards, I talk to 5. Those 5 then run smaller teams. But if you're dealing with potential 6,000-7,000 people turning up, coming down roads, okay, so why don't we put stewards out on a half-mile marker with my mobile number, so that then it's a big kind of wave of people turning up, we know they're coming, and we can plan for that, we can move people forward. So there's 2 formats, there's a prior planning, and then there's having a really good team on the day to do that, run by someone who's a sole responsibility. You don't want your stage manager and your event manager being the same people. Like, I let the stage manager get on with it, and then they leave me alone. But I would say, if it's something that's worrying you, give me a call, give someone else a call. It's something that actually doesn't have to be that complicated, but once you've done it a few times, it's much easier, it's much more straightforward, and if you have a bit of a relationship. So by me approaching the councils, by me approaching the teams, going, listen, hi, this is who I am, I've got a bit of credibility, so they listen, and now we're going to sit down and I'm going to tell you absolutely everything we're going to do, and you're going to answer what I need.
Okay, thank you.
It does vary in different councils sometimes.
Just before we talk about the last most important part, about refreshments, Brighton Passion is a very good example of where after a few years, the council really understood what we were trying to achieve. And the relationship became so strong. Brighton puts on more events than any other city in the country. And yet they found great value in dedicating somebody from their office just to our play. They wanted to do that. So now we have somebody that is our go-to woman. Whenever and it's any time. We can phone her any time, we can go to the office any time, because they see it as such an important part of the city. They see it on the community side and also on the religious side. The second thing is the BBC. The BBC are excellent in so many ways, but they're also exhausted in the same ways that all local rags are as well. They want text given to them, they want information given to them, they need work done for them to be interested in coming to you. But if you get it right, and again Brighton got it right, after a while they'll stop writing about the obvious stuff which is blood in our cities. You know, they always love to write about the fact that we're putting blood, a bloody scene, into the centre of their town or city. It's an easy story, it's a lazy story to write. But once we started giving them feedback and saying that's not really helping the production, instead, why don't you start talking about this or this or this, they said, great. And BBC dedicated a journalist to the production as well. So that journalist was our journalist. So we had somebody from the council and somebody from BBC, and then somebody from the local rag, the Echo, also, the Argus, sorry, came on board as well. So we had dedicated people just because we tried very, very hard to set up as many meetings as we can and build up a strong relationship with them. Once we'd done all the groundwork, now we don't have to phone them at all. They want to know what's happening. And that's a boon for any community event, isn't it? Just last, sorry.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Lastly, I do want to hear something about the challenges of providing refreshments, but also something of the importance of it.
Well, I think it's very important. As I say, most of our most of the people in our group are working, and we have our rehearsals early evening. So they come to us, and I get the teas and whatever ready very quickly. But it's really appreciated, you know, they can just sort of cast the work aside and get together for a few minutes before we actually go into the rehearsal. And it is important.
If you don't know already, I brought this example up here, which is here because any director, any actor knows that when you come to these performances, you want to give your best. And you may do an elaborate warm-up to get you focused for the work ahead, and it is work, and it's hard work, and it's a sacrifice to your life and your family life and your work life to put these plays on. But if you don't know, this lubrication, the tea, the cake, the conversation, the chance to just centre yourself, to share prayer, to share time before the hard work, I promise you that your audience will benefit in the long run. So treasure anyone who says, right at the beginning in that first launch meeting, anyone who says, I don't want to be on stage, I just want to help.
Yes.
That's the most important foundation stone you can lay down. Get the funds in place for refreshments, or raise money as you go along for the refreshments. Have a little pot, let people put money in. It's their way of contributing perhaps. But it's essential. I can't underline it enough.
Can I just come
Yes,
in on
please.
that as well?
Yep.
Also, at your rehearsals, we found that every time you pitched up to a rehearsal, then refreshments obviously are provided there too. Well, they were in Southampton. But also, we found that people were offering to bring along their excess jars of jam. If they were, if it was jam making season, they bought jam and marmalade, etc., etc. And very often there'd be a little sale of work at each rehearsal. It might only be £10–15, but it's £10–15 that you wouldn't have had they not done it. So yes, it's and can I just get my pièce de résistance here? Is that all right? Baker Cake Week. I organised a city-wide cake week, £1,900. And I was blown away by that because it's something that everybody can do. Each church that was represented, they took it upon themselves to organise it. So I sent a template out to them for them to put their own details on. And so, you know, it was £300 there, £150 somewhere else, £1,900. You can't afford to not do it. And it's also being replicated for Passion Retold in March as well.
Thank you so much. We've come to the end of our session. A quick question, please.
The lady said very important thing, the previous speaker said, the fact that they increased the scale, the fact that they had a donation pot when we came in, you're having a cup of tea, you're having a cup of milk.
Most casts number 40, 80, 250. It's a great resource, isn't it? These are people who want to give of themselves for this important project, put the pot out, give them an opportunity to buy the made cake, make a costume, make something. Yeah.
You'll find very often there's a widow's mite aspect about all of this.
Yes, right. Yes.
No, just because Jonathan's had this very, we can say, this wonderful idea, which I think could be replicated with other passion projects or fundraising.
Just, you're eating into your own lunchtime now, so it's quite all right.
It's a very simple idea. It goes back to the medieval mystery place.
Yes.
Sharon said to me, we can get this Arts Council funding, we need to match it with commercial funding. So in the last 5 minutes, it's fairly typical, but yesterday the Royal Navy Chaplaincy Service agreed to sponsor our Roman soldiers, £250. Today, the bridal shop across the road are going to reflect on whether they can sponsor the Virgin Mary at £250. Bette is going to give us some food for our last supper, so the cast will be fed. And I've asked the Thailand people across the road to sponsor the procession, and they can provide the stewards. So, and then we've had another positive response just a moment or two ago, another £250. So I think people are quite open. Yeah, quite open to it. So that's £2,500.
Thank you. So in closing, because Alex, you still, I'd like you to still do a quick talk about the website.
Yep.
Yeah. But first of all, certainly thanks to our panel. Remember, you can talk to them all through the rest of the day. Acknowledge that these people have, at some point, overcome most of the difficulties that you're going to face. Grill them. Be buoyed up by what they have achieved. Be encouraged. The difficult meeting that we had in Leicester. The budget that sits on your table and you have to match, that you have to find this money. The impossibility of matching the artistic director's plans of taking over a city centre. The absurd design that might be handed over to Douglas. 120 people asking for tea. They've all overcome these things, often overcoming something they wouldn't normally face in their normal jobs. These are very different projects. Yes?
Sorry, you just in case we don't get another chance to say, Mum got to get back to Southampton fairly properly because we've got a family relative we haven't seen in 20 years or whatever this afternoon. I've left my business cards at the back table when you walk in. I'll be around for a few minutes afterwards. I'm also listed on the website. Do just give us a bell if you need help with fundraising or you're not sure about the road closure or whatever. Very happy to talk it through with you. I'll be around for a few minutes afterwards, probably out the back at the next session if anyone wants to pop out and say hello. But like I said, our cards are there, you can get hold of us. Do please give us a bell if you're struggling with anything.
Thank you.
You will have lots of people in your cast and your production that come from different churches. Identify a church champion in each of those churches, because there may be stuff that's coming through on email that will go to the church office, but the person that opens the email, they have to make the decision whether they pass on that information. If they don't know about the passion play you're putting on, they'll bin it. So you must it's a very good idea, I found, to identify a church champion, someone who can fight your corner for your Sunday notice sheets, your parish magazines, etc., etc.
So be encouraged by them and use the Passion Trust to get in touch with anyone here or anyone that's not here but in other town cities that have also faced these difficulties. And as Alex is about to talk about, please keep contributing your experiences. The Passion Trust can offer your experiences to all sorts of people, and it becomes a very, very valuable resource.